Thank you for tuning in once again to his Vine and Victory podcast. My name is Kurt Olson. I'm your host. I'm coming to you on the early afternoon of April 2nd, 2025. And just one word of housekeeping here. If you hear any noise in the background, we have a thunderstorm that is emerging literally here in Western New York. So, with all that said, just a few things I want to bring to your attention here with this week that has passed, or in the week that we are now in. And the first one is Iran. I mentioned this last week, 2 weeks ago, about how the tensions with Iran and the Houthis have intensified. Um, President Trump wants them to get rid of their nuclear program or come to the negotiating table, at which point I'm like, do does a group of people who sought the assassination of the man who's now in power want to sit down and talk about their nuclear program? Um, I have my doubts, but to juice some things up and incentivize the Iranians in order to get there, apparently there has been some strategic moving of some military equipment and other things that are being moved from the Pacific to the Middle East, all being used as an incentive for the Iranians to start talking. And I can't believe that's going to go unnoticed by the Chinese, who have been threatening Taiwan for a long time. So keep a watch out for that. That stands to get a whole lot trickier than simpler, especially when you have Vladimir Zelensky having blown off Washington yet again, and they are so far apart in resolving the Ukraine-Russia war. So that's the start with foreign policy. Let's bring it home a little bit. Um, Last weekend, word surfaced that President Trump and his lawyers were trying to figure out a way where he could potentially serve beyond 2028, or let's say January 20th, 2029. And this is a bad idea. Basically, what's happening here is he has he has I don't know if it's one lawyer or a team of lawyers looking at this, and they're looking at, of course, the constitutional stipulations that there's just two terms for a president, and they're looking at all kinds of ways that this can be massaged and parsed and potentially explained to the American people. And the thing that bothers me is they are acting like Bill Clinton did during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. For those of you who were not too young and remember that time in our country, Bill Clinton had to do at least one sit down deposition. It may have been more, and he was asked a question, and his response was, "It depends what is." And when I hear lawyers trying to explain words and what they mean, one of the things they're looking at is potentially JD Vance running as president in 2028, the ticket basically being flipped, and then shortly after Vance would be in power, he would resign, and the vice president, now Trump, would take over. And don't think that's going to make the case. But the bigger issue for me is this: in 2028, Donald Trump will be 82. We just had an 82-year-old president. And one of the things that's going on in our country, and it's going to be something that I tackle here in a few moments with Doge. Um, One of the things that's happening in our country is we have people that are serving too long in government. And this includes the Congress. This includes people across the spectrum. And we have people that are in their 80s. We had a U.S. Senator die. Well, what was it? Dianne Feinstein. I don't know what year she died. It was either 24 or 23. And she was in her 90s and she was in a wheelchair. She had a daughter that had gotten power of attorney, and she simply shouldn't have been there that long. Chuck Grassley is in his early 90s right now, senator from Iowa. Um, Mitch McConnell is in his early 80s. He is not seeking reelection in 2026, but he's in his early 80s, and he's had some moments where he has frozen publicly. Nancy Pelosi has looked her age many times. And I just say all that to say this: if Donald Trump thinks the American people want a president in their early 80s who just happens to have attempted to fool the American people and run as vice president only to have the presidency dropped in his lap again, if you really think we want an 80-some-year-old president, you're kidding yourself. I, for one, don't, and I do not believe for a second I'm alone in that thinking. Doge, one of the things I'm going to link in this podcast is a Fox News interview that Brett Baer, one of the few news correspondents that I can actually respect. Brett Baer did a sit down with Elon Musk and a group of, what was it, 6 or 7 others from the Doge team. And this interview goes on for like 38 minutes, and it's in like 3 or 4 segments. And you don't get the commercials. You see where the cut is, but it immediately goes from the commercial break. And um that's worth 38 minutes of your time. It's extremely enlightening about some of the things that they have seen as they have gone into departments and agencies and found things. Um, this is kind of a spoiler alert, and I'm not going to say much more about what they say. Go ahead and see that yourself. But one of the things they talk about extensively is the fact that there are federal agencies that have dozens of IT departments. And basically, what that creates is computer systems that don't communicate with one another. And what it's doing is creating avenue for fraud. And I'll go even deeper, the fraud being legitimate crimes. And that's the part of this that I'm waiting for. And Elon Musk is going to be done well ahead of July 2026, because when they were first talking about this, it was July 2026, the nation's 250th birthday. But he's a special employee of the federal government for only 130 days. And by sometime in May, I don't know if it's 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, whatever 130 days becomes, um, maybe the end of May, um, he's going to be done. And they're making changes in real time. I would hope that there is, and they also talk about the Doge.gov, a website that you can go to. And while things that are being done are not just as they're happening, you can be aware of them. They have like maybe a 1 or 2 week lag time, but you can see what they found. And they were very clear about one thing: the fraud and the scams being run through federal government finances is very real. And here's the thing that bothers me: as we deal with the left and the mainstream media, and I realize that those two things are synonymous, I get that, but the message the media is presenting to the American people is that, oh, these people are going in and they're going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It's not true. That is not what they're doing. And the group of Americans, and I believe it's a fair amount of fair number of people, because it's also members of the um, Democrats in Congress. Um, the group of people that believe this are it's propaganda, because that's not what's happening. And this interview that Brett Baer does is extremely informative. And I'm going to go back to something that I was saying in relation to President Trump and his age, because we have a lot of people serving in government that have never been in the private sector. And obviously the president has. But when you have lifetime civil servants and all they know is government work, they don't know the innovations and creativity that comes from the private sector with use of um, technology for getting things done. Um, they were also very clear that you have either the entire federal government or multiple departments in the federal government that could not pass an audit. And that should alarm every American, because you want your financial systems doing what they're supposed to, and the people in charge of those doing what they're supposed to, so that money is accounted for. And with our government, it's not. And here's some of these other things that are happening as the media puts out this narrative that, oh, they're cutting the government, they're cutting the government, they're cutting the government. They're looking at waste, fraud, and abuse, and ways that the government is doing things that need to be streamlined and simplified to make what they do more efficient. And I'm going to let that video, because there's multiple anecdotes that are shared there. And take the time to listen. It is worth your 38 minutes to do that. As an American, and as someone who I would hope want to be an informed American. So, but there's so many people that are running around with their hair on fire. Oh, they're cutting government, cutting government, cutting government. This is the thing that the media doesn't tell you. As a taxpayer, the government works for you. The government works for you, for us. And the federal government is not this massive job board and, oh, let's just create millions of jobs that are by the government. That is not like the private sector taking risks and being an entrepreneur and doing things with their money. Because ultimately, what the government does comes from our pockets. And this kind of stuff is being lost ever since we heard in the early stages of the Trump administration, oh, Doge is here, Doge is here. Oh, let's be scared. Let's go cower in the corner. This process of having government examined has been long overdue. And when I was sharing information at the beginning of this also represents a failure of the United States Congress, the US House and the US Senate. Make no mistake about it, because all of the mechanisms are in place for there to do oversight. They're not doing it because one of the things that's going on here is the federal government's too big. And when you're too big and you're tripping over yourself and you're wasting money and you're spending millions on silly things or potentially billions on silly things, you need to be brought back to reality. And this is long overdue. And every government entity in this country, federal, states, universities, um, public schools, um, you name it, local governments, towns, cities, villages, counties, you name it, they all should have this kind of thing being done. And because my guess, there are thousands of public entities, again, taxpayer money footing the bill, and things aren't being taken care of. The store isn't being minded properly, and things aren't getting done. So, but please watch that Brett Baer interview with Elon Musk and company, because it is worthwhile and worth the time to become informed about what has been going on for a really long time. Last night, on yesterday, on Tuesday the 1st, there were elections in two states, Florida and Wisconsin. Now, when President Trump won the election and he started identifying people for his cabinet, he was warned that it might not be a good idea to be picking off people from the US House to be in your cabinet because the majority is really slim. And when we say slim, we're talking like 2, 3 votes. And what came as a result of the election, there were 2 seats in Florida that became vacant. Matt Gaetz, who was, you might not remember this, Matt Gaetz was the original Attorney General nominee until a variety of things came out and his nomination was withdrawn, and Pam Bondi became the next person. Um, and then he also tapped Mike Waltz to be his national security advisor. And so yesterday there were special elections in two districts in Florida. Now the Republicans won both. But let's just make this observation. Where Trump won last November in those two districts by 30% or more, the Republicans won those districts by around 14%. So, and things change in special elections. In special elections, because either someone dies, someone resigns for whatever the reason, um, special elections happen. And you get nowhere near the turnout as you do under normal general election circumstances. And that's what happened again. And the Republicans did retain those two seats in Florida. In Wisconsin, there was both a good and bad. The bad. Whenever my wife asks me, do you want the good news or the bad news? I always want the bad news. The bad news is the Supreme Court race between Democrat Susan Crawford and Republican Brad Schimmel um, was literally a fight over who would have majority on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. A liberal was stepping down, and the Republicans and conservatives saw this as an opportunity to get one of their own to help influence the state of Wisconsin. And Susan Crawford won by 10%. And here's the thing, the Republicans hit their targets. They were able to get far more votes for Brad Schimmel than they've had in the past for state Supreme Court justices. However, the Democrats got higher turnout as well. Now, let me just say this. During Tuesday evening, I was seeing some stuff on X that indicated there were some voting districts, and I don't know where they were, but there were some voting districts that had run out of paper ballots. Um, how we continue to have this nonsense happen with elections in this country is just mind numbing. But and I haven't seen anything more of that so far today. Um, but Elon Musk invested some money in the state of Wisconsin. They sent a lot of people there to get out the vote for Brad Schimmel, and they hit their targets. But the Democrats got more out too, and that's what happened there. Now, the final thing I want to share with you, and this is something that I've had on a potential item for my podcast for a couple weeks now. So this is a little dated, but it's still worthwhile to hear. So there is a journalist on the left by the name of Ezra Klein. He was connected to Vox, VOX, Vox.com in the past. He has done a lot of comms work in the past for progressive and left wing groups and as a journalist. And what he is arguing is there's a lot of things that are going wrong in the Democratic Party, and until it's fixed, they're not winning anything anytime soon. And there was a post that I caught on one of the town hall media websites called Hot Air that was written by a guy by the name of John Sexton. And and this piece is really long. Um, I'll probably link it as well in the podcast comments, so that if you are inclined to read it in its entirety, you can. But basically, I'm going to get to some high points. And so basically, Ezra Klein was talking to a guy by the name of David Shore, last name Shor, and this guy is basically he's a data nerd, okay, and he's been making certain prognostications over time about a variety of things. And as Ezra Klein and this David Shore are talking, there are some key things that are highlighted here, and I want to bring your attention to this. Democrats are winning 85% of black conservatives in 2016, but only 77% in 2024. They were winning 34% of conservative Hispanics in 2016, but that falls by half to 17% in 2024. They were winning 28% of conservative Asians in 2016, which falls to 20% in 2024. It's always a little weird for somebody who is a self described conservative to vote for Democrats who are quite a liberal party now. But what we're seeing among non white voters is people voting more by ideology and not by ethnic group. Another thing I'm going to highlight as this thing goes further down, I find this part of this chart shocking. I sometimes talk about narrative violations, and if we knew anything about Donald Trump 8 years ago, it was that young people didn't like him. And Republicans had been maybe throwing away young people for generations in order to run up their margins among senior citizens. And that is what we were seeing 8 years ago with Donald Trump. He had high numbers of senior citizens who were voting for him, low numbers of young people, meaning millennials, Gen Z. But if you look at this chart, 75-year-old white men supported Kamala Harris at a significantly higher rate than 20-year-old white men. It is a real shift. This is a thing I am most shocked by in the last 4 years. That young people have gone from being the most progressive generation since the baby boomers to maybe even in some ways more so to becoming potentially more conservative generation than we've experienced in maybe 50 to 60 years. Now, I can remember when I was growing up, people were talking about how the Reagan Revolution was creating a generation of conservatives among Gen X. And while I think a lot of us in the Gen X crowd who were conservative kind of maintained that course, for some Gen X, that's not always the case. But what they're seeing with young people, Gen Z, the Zoomers as they now call them, is that there's a growing number, especially among males, who support Donald Trump. And one last section I'm going to read here. It's really telling that this Elon stuff floats to the top here because it's very hard for something to compete with protecting Social Security and Medicare. The fact that there are multiple Elon related things up at the top really does tell a story that there's something unusual about what he's doing. It's very easy to tie what Musk is doing to harming individual people. One of the clearest patterns in ad testing is the best content comes from real people staring into a camera and talking about the ways Republicans have personally hurt them. The two things that we should do is fight against social welfare cuts and also attack Elon Musk for the chaos he's creating. And I think there's something that basically every wing of the party should be on board with. And this is what gets me to the lies. the media and Democrats are lying to the American people about what Doge is doing in the federal government. It is pure, unbridled fabrications, dishonesty. Call it whatever you will. These people are lying about what's happening. And the Republicans are going to have to find a way to deal with this. And this interview that Brett Baer did is helpful in its transparency of what Doge is doing. And again, Doge.gov, you can go and find yourself. But this is something to keep watching and paying attention to as we head headlong toward 2026, midterm elections, headlong toward 2028. Um, what happens with literally both sides of who is running for president that year? So there's a lot going on here that bears watching more long term. And once again, I just want to share that this podcast is on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. Dropping another column this week and on Sunday. And until next time, God bless and goodbye.